Hello, and welcome to another episode of the B2B Leadership Podcast. My name is Nils Vinje, and today my guest is Melissa Benua. Melissa, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Nils. Glad to be here.
I'm excited to dig into all things leadership with you, Melissa. But first, would you share with me and our audience the role that you're in today and the company that you work for?
Yeah, so I'm a senior director of engineering at a startup called mParticle. I run our platform engineering group. So my group is responsible for all of the good, efficient things that help our engineers get good code out the door really quickly to make our customers really happy.
Wonderful. And who are your customers? What kind of a market are you serving?
Yeah, so mParticle is a customer data platform, and our customers are basically anybody who wants to use their data to make their business more efficient, and to be able to take quick, quick, relevant action to keep their customers really happy, while maintaining, efficient spend and efficient use of their time and resources.
Yeah, when we're talking data and making decisions, that's a hot topic all the time. So
All
you
the
guys are
time.
filling an incredible void, and I'm sure your customers are extremely happy. Are there any particular verticals or types of problems that you solve better than anybody else out there when it comes to taking data and making decisions?
Yeah, so we're in a couple places. So we are very, very, very good at helping our customers know what their data is. If their data looks like what they think it should look like, or if one of their engineers has maybe misspelled the word login in an event JSON, before you
Hmm.
have to find out 30 days later that all of your events are garbage and have to be thrown away.
That's
But
unfortunate. Yep. Good.
really unfortunate, but a problem more common than you would think.
I believe
And
it.
then enabling our customers to do what they need to do with our data. So we are I think we're the top in the industry at our level of connections to other companies, right? Because your
Mm,
data isn't useful if it just sits in a silo and nobody can poke at it. Your data is
yeah,
useful when you can use it. So we have hundreds of integration partners that we can send the data to, whatever the best in class is for whatever domain of problem you need to solve. There's
wow,
always new startups coming every day.
that's
Then
right.
who knows who the newest, hottest AI analytics company is going to be? I don't know, but mParticle will probably talk to them.
And you want to be able to just pipe your data into them through mParticle. Is that right?
Exactly, without
Nice.
you having to do a big engineering lift to do it.
That's the key. Oh, that's wonderful. What a great solution. And there's no shortage of data in our world today, and there will be no shortage of data in the future. So you
It's
guys are
not
solving
getting
some big
smaller.
problems. Right. It's not getting smaller. Okay, awesome. All right, so Melissa, let's switch gears a little bit and start talking some leadership pieces, and I want to find out more about your journey. Would you share with us how did you get into your very first leadership position?
Yeah, so I started my career as a software tester, moved into distributed systems, back-end engineering, and was a back-end engineer at Microsoft when I sort of started realizing engineering is fun. I love writing code, but I think I would like to solve systemic people problems as well because those are also very interesting. And I told my manager at the time, yes, I'm really interested. I'd like to start by running an intern, hosting an intern. I'd like to lead some team projects because I'd like to get into management. And at the time, my manager said, "Great, we'll give you an intern and we'll let you lead these tech projects, but you should really think about if you actually want to go to people management because you're so technical. You're so good at these technical things. We need more women like you in the technical side. Are you sure that you want to go over into management?"
Hang on, hang
And
on.
I
So use the term, we need more women like you in the technical field. What did it feel like on the receiving end of that comment? It sounds a little just, putting you in a box, but what was it like when you heard that feedback back from your manager?
Yeah, and I know that he meant it as a compliment, right? I know it was meant with the best of intentions of paying me credit in a field that can be quite hard. But it was actually pretty demoralizing because it's not what I wanted to do. I mean, I
Yeah.
liked being technical. I enjoyed, I still to this day enjoy solving technical problems, but it was a subtle put down that maybe what I'm trying to do isn't what I should be doing, and I'm maybe better suited for something else. Right? It was very hard not to read that interpretation in.
Well, and the reason I asked that question is because there's two sides of this, right? And both sides inadvertently think they're doing the right thing,
Hmm.
and both sides are causing a conflict with the other side. So that manager who is sharing that sentiment coming from a good place, right?
Hmm.
Supporting you was actually doing the exact opposite. And how just, kind of want to call attention to how important it is that in how we as leaders respond to requests like that. And even though we might
Exactly.
think we're sharing great advice or a recommendation that's appropriate, it could have the completely different impact, just like it did for you.
Right, because the message I took away was not, I'm really technical, I would excel down this road, I should stay on this road. The message I took away was, my manager must see something in me that wouldn't make a good leader, so I probably shouldn't pursue this because
Yeah.
my manager is discouraging me from doing so.
And yeah, that's just, I mean, it's just sad because there's that was not the intent, right? And the
Right,
message is how the message is received is always what message was actually received, not the intent.
right. Was the
And even
was
though that
the
wasn't the
adage,
intent,
yeah,
yeah,
communication happens at the listener's ear, not the speaker's mouth.
100%. Yeah. And this is a perfect example of that. And so, for our audience listening, think about when someone is saying that they want to go do X, Y, Z, whatever it is, whether it's people management or even more technical stuff. And the response that you give can have the complete opposite effect, even though you think you're doing the right thing or you think you're giving them support and showing how much, like in this case, how much technical, credit you had in that particular position.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So you got that message back from this manager. What happened from there?
So honestly, I didn't stay on that team long, right? He made it pretty clear to me anyway, that he wasn't aligned with how he wanted to grow me versus what I thought that I wanted. So I jumped teams, and I, pretty quickly left the company to join to join another company where it sounded like I might be able to get that impact there instead. I joined a much smaller team, much smaller company.
Okay, let me back up for a second. So, what changed in the relationship between you and your manager and you and that company after that conversation? Like, was that the point at which you said, well, no way this is going to work? Or did you, try to work it out for a little bit and was like, maybe I'll just see how it plays out? Like how fast of a decision was it in your mind? Because it had a huge impact. You actually left the company eventually.
I did.
And this was one of the world's biggest software companies. Like there's a lot
Yes,
of
it was.
opportunities there. A lot of people are employed. And you actually left partly as a result of this conversation. I'm sure there were other factors, but what changed between your manager and you, and how fast did it change?
It wasn't, I didn't quit on the spot.
No,
but it took, I started paying attention, right, to what opportunities am I being given? Do I feel like I'm being stretched and challenged, and am I being supported? And a couple of other things fell through, which probably weren't entirely my manager's under his control or his fault, but they did fall through, and things that I was really interested in doing. Organizational structure made it look like the opportunities even the ones that I had wrested away, weren't going to be given to people of my level again, just in the way they chose to reorg the team. So I could see there wasn't going to be an opportunity for me to do the things that I really wanted to do.
Yeah.
And as that became, more and more clear, I disconnected from the team and started that's when you open the door to other opportunities.
To all those recruiter pings that you get, like, hey, how would you like a new opportunity over here? Okay, cool. So, and I dig in on this because so much it comes down to the lots of small little things, right? People don't leave, like you said, on the spot unless there's something egregious or something crazy.
Unless something big happens.
Exactly, which it can, but most of the time it's not. But if you have a series of a lot of little things where your expectations of the organization, expectations of opportunities, whatever you've been told in the past about opportunities don't come true, then it makes cutting the ties even easier. And at some point, it becomes very clear, like, all right, this just isn't going to work out.
Exactly. Every misalignment, every miscommunication, every, slipped promise makes it a little bit easier to cut those ties.
Yep, 100%. And so we as leaders have a very big obligation to make sure that we are consciously aware of when those missed expectations happen and how many of them happen and what the real state is of the individuals. You're a very valuable person, and that organization lost you partly as a result of missing lots of little things that were potential opportunities.
Right. Not having a clear vision that I was aligned together about my growth.
That's right. And that's what it comes down to. Okay, cool. So you went to company number 2, and the intent, this was a much smaller organization, and the intent was, I still want to get into leadership, right? So what happened?
Still want to get into leadership.
Company.
So I came in with the understanding, right? I didn't come into a leadership, it wasn't hired as a manager, didn't come into a leadership position, but made it pretty clear on the interview, look, this is where I would like to get into. Obviously, we're quite small right now. I'm more than happy to pull my weight as an engineer, but as these leadership positions come up, I would like to be very seriously considered for them. I mean, we're
Yep.
small enough. Like, it's not like I'm competing with hundreds of other people.
Yeah.
We're small enough that shouldn't be a problem. And then it turns out that it was a problem. They needed me to continue to stay technical. For whatever reason or another, it became clear over time that our leadership philosophies didn't align. What I wanted and what I thought a good leader wasn't always the same as what the organization wanted and thought a good leader was. And it's, not right or wrong, but it is different.
Different. Yep.
And it became clear over time as well that wasn't going to work out. It became actually really crystallized. I ran an intern program, and what I thought my interns should be doing, the way we should be training these people who are new to professional jobs, don't have any. I'm setting their baseline for what to expect out of the rest of their professional lives.
Yep.
And what I thought that was appropriate to set to did not align with what my leadership thought was appropriate to do with interns. And that really, really, really made it clear to everybody that whether or not I'm good at a leadership role, I wasn't going to be good at a leadership role in that organization.
In that environment. Right. When there's such a difference between the expectations. Now, prior to you running that intern program, was there discussion about the program? Was there agreement on what the interns were going to do or how you were going to approach it? Or was it hands off, like do whatever you want? And then only later came back and found out that, things were not what they had expected?
There were, in retrospect, there were probably hints that there was misalignment there. But as often happens in small companies, sometimes things get kind of seat of your pants, and a small idea blows up into a big idea, and before you know it, you're hiring one intern, you got 6. You're redesigning the program on the fly, you're resetting expectations on the fly.
Yep.
But there were certainly hints that, with experience, now I'm very aware of these implied lack of alignment between what I think a project should do and what somebody else thinks a project should do.
Is there an
good
example?
hard lessons?
Yeah, well, that would be great to dig into and peel apart a little bit. The implied lack of alignment, because I think there is a lot of vagueness in work today, period. And sometimes people will say things, they will make comments, they will be offhand, it won't necessarily be that direct. But is there an example you could share of one of these implied lack of alignment things that sticks out in your mind as like, I pay acute attention anytime anybody says something like that?
Right. There would be casual mentions to the productivity boost we would get from having these interns, from all the work they were going to turn through. And anybody who's ever had interns knows that you don't really get a product. At best, you break even. Yeah. Right? It's kind of a community service. It can be a great recruiting arm. It can be a great way to pay back the community. It can be a good way to find people you're going to want to hire when they graduate. Yeah. It's not a productivity boost when you look at the time, right, a more experienced engineer has to put in to get the output out of them.
Yeah.
It's almost always a net negative.
And they're like, they're cheap. So of course we'll get huge productivity for a cheap cost. And
that was exactly the mindset that was going in. Oh, these guys are really cheap. We're paying them, we were a gaming company. We're paying them, very little compared to what we'll have to pay them when they graduate. Because it's games. Everybody loves games. And, we're going to get all this feature work done. And I would say, I would say, I guess, or I'd try to reset, lower expectations a little, but it didn't really occur to me that, this is going to be a bigger problem, because they're not joking. They're very serious about the work that they think these interns are going to do.
Well, and that's
how many hours I'm going to have to put in to get them to do it.
Exactly. Right. And there's these underlying assumptions that are not being, talked about, agreed upon at a one-to-one or even just on the table level.
Right.
And ultimately this all came to a head later. And what was the circumstances where this came out to the point where you were like, okay, we've gone 2 completely different directions. We have very different ideas of what we can do with this intern program. Was there a particular incident, or did something bubble up at one point and just get to be too much?
We ran the program to completion. The interns had a good time. I was very aggressive in defending their work-life balance, especially, and defending the work that they should be doing, the realistic expectations. So I took the hits for them, right? I took the hits for the misalignment, for protecting, for shielding them. But you can only disagree fundamentally with your leadership for so long before you're like, nah, you got to go.
Yeah.
Whether you're right or wrong, it doesn't matter.
Right.
You
Right.
cannot be misaligned at that fundamental level. It's time to go.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that whether you're right or wrong doesn't matter. Is a
It
key
doesn't
piece there,
matter.
right? And a lot of people, leaders in particular, and ICs, it doesn't matter, want to be right. Like we all have most people have an intrinsic quality to want to be right because it's no fun being wrong. But whether you're right or wrong in this case, it didn't really matter because you were so misaligned. It's
Right.
irrelevant.
Right. Now, of course, I made mistakes, right? I should have checked assumptions. I made plenty of mistakes. There were mistakes made on the other side too, but the culmination of those and the root was misaligned.
Yeah. Always there was a belief that we can hire very cheap labor and get 10x productivity
He
out of
may have
this.
been right? For all I know,
Yeah.
he was right and it could have worked. And the fact that I said, no, I don't think we can, that was the problem. He could have been right. Absolutely. I'm perfectly willing to admit that. But it doesn't matter whether he was right or I was right because we didn't agree.
Right. And if one side can't come to can't be on the same level with the other, whether or not you agree, then you have just conflict, right?
Right. And there's no way I was going to be successful.
Tension. Yeah. No way you
Even
can
if I ran the program perfectly to my standards, they were never going to meet his standards.
Yeah. Right. And if you magically had somehow ended up with this huge productivity boost, then they would have been happy, but you would have been like, huh? I don't get it.
Right. I would have, would have had to pay it somewhere else. I would have been exhausted or we would have had to pay. We would have had to compromise on something that I wasn't willing to compromise on.
Yes.
But because I wasn't willing doesn't mean we shouldn't have.
These are such great examples of the tiny little comments here and there that have the potential to blow up stuff like entire projects, entire relationships, right? Oh yeah, looking forward to that productivity boost. Wait, yeah, okay, I'll just move on. And then like a month or two later, it's like, where's the productivity? And it's like, hold on, what are you talking about? And then that only becomes the time when the alignment discussion happens.
Exactly, and it's too late by then.
Yeah, it's too late. Okay, so reflecting on that now, on that particular experience, and knowing everything you know today, what would you do differently before that program even was launched or got started? How would you frame it up?
So it's the way we do it now, and the way I'm rigorous around every project I run, whether it's technical, non-technical, is aligning on the first principles. What are we trying to get out of this? Yep. Write it down, make everybody agree, and then what are we debating about? What are the questionable things, right? That are not obviously everybody agrees the sun rises in the morning. But, are interns a productivity boost or not? Do we agree on that? If we don't, let's have a discussion all the way through the end. What do we want out of the intern program? What work is appropriate? What work isn't appropriate? How much work are we expecting out of their engineering mentor? How many interns can an engineering mentor have at what productivity hit? What are the expectations we have out of you if you're a mentor for the rest of your work?
And so what you would have done looking back now is, and this is an example of what you do today, is before a project starts, laying that all out with the key people who are going to be part of the project. And I'm curious, you work in fast-paced environments. Sometimes there's going to be answers to these things, and sometimes there's probably not. So how do you handle the case where you have to move fast, but at the same time, you got to have realistic, aligned expectations? How do you balance those two?
We agree on the guess, right? We agree this is a guess. It's only got so much confidence in it, but we agree, right? We agree that, it's going to every mentor is probably going to take a 20% productivity hit for interns. And it may be 18%, it may be 25%. Hopefully it's not 70% because then we were really wrong. But we agree, right? The fundamentals, we agree that there's going to be a productivity hit to the work that this person is going to do because they're doing this other work.
Yeah. And that agreement is from a documentation standpoint or a formalization standpoint. How do you capture all of that?
It written down. So because I'm an engineer, we do a lot of specs, a lot of tech specs, a lot of establishing on requirements. So I graphed a lot of the thing I used to do as a IC engineer, all of that level of design and architecture. I graphed it onto my management techniques and my process techniques to say, we would have written a technical spec to describe what the software is going to do. We're going to write a technical spec, quote unquote, to describe what this process is going to do, what this program is going to do.
Oh, that's pretty cool. And then you're having the discussion and agreeing and signing off on the technical spec of whatever this
Exactly.
initiative or project is going to do or process.
Exactly.
Huh, that's really cool. I think that's a great adaptation of the structure of engineering applied to, leadership. It's great.
Systems of
Like
people.
systems of people. I love how you said that. That's perfect. That's what it's all about, right? Because the same questions exist in an engineering challenge where there are assumptions made about a particular feature or a function or something. And if it's not
Hmm.
designed into the spec and agreed to, it's not going to happen. Somebody's going to
Right.
be disappointed.
If we don't agree on what the goals of the project are, how will we know that it was successful?
Exactly. And I think that is a place where a lot of leaders get stuck because there's sometimes I don't know, burning desire to get things moving or get going and figure it out as you go, even though like it might feel good in the moment because you're going fast. Once you
Right.
get a little ways down, you realize that you have to unwind a whole lot more because you didn't do that upfront work of speccing it out.
One of my colleagues who's an architect, his favorite phrase to use when we're talking about this stuff is that weeks of coding can save you hours of specking.
That's that sounds true to architect fashion. There you go.
The implication being, right, that if you had only spent 2 or 3 hours specking, you could have saved yourself 3 weeks of going down a crazy
Right.
road that never was going to lead to where you wanted to get to.
That's right. And I think that's probably the norm in a lot of times, not every time, but and the first principles you're talking about here that you've taken from your engineering experience apply perfectly to the systems of people from a leadership perspective, which is awesome.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right. So you eventually exited that organization,
I
right?
did.
And you moved on to mParticle. So now mParticle, I'm sure you went in there saying, hey, I want to get into people leadership. What happened when you joined?
So I made it really clear from the interview time, right, from the very very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'm very technical. Of course, I'll do a technical interview, but I really really would prefer to do team management. And as long as there is a very clear direct path for me to team management, I will be delighted to join and do whatever technical work you need.
Yeah.
And being explicitly clear during the interview process before we were even discussing offer made it right. It made it very easy for us to see that we were aligned. Especially because I was sitting there, I was sitting there very, very, very visibly pregnant, and just laid all my cards out on the table, right? Because at that point there's no real risk to not being clear, and the risk, as I had experienced over and over again, of being unclear about basically anything was just too high to tolerate.
That's a really good point in the interview process to bring this level of clarity and alignment and expectations and agreement all the way back to the beginning before you even joined the company. Because
Before I even joined.
if it's ambiguous and vague there's no way it'll ever happen down the line or highly
Right.
unlikely.
The most power you have is before you sign the offer.
That's right. Once you sign the offer, your amount of leverage goes down significantly.
Goes way
Absolutely.
down. And then you agreed to something. What do you mean you're going to change the thing you already agreed to? It's not a good look.
Yeah, right. It's very difficult to change it or even to request. Sometimes we feel even pressure to be like, well, I got started. I just got to keep going down this path. Maybe eventually I'll figure out a way to get back to what I wanted to do.
Yeah, and I make sure I understand everything. So when I joined Microsoft, I didn't understand how levels were written, and they only wrote them in numeric form. And I only knew that, I applied to this job, it had this title. So I didn't know or think to check that, yep, the number on my offer letter corresponded to the number, which was the title that I interviewed against for the process. And I came in a level lower than I thought I should have.
Interesting.
Than I believed I had been brought in as, but because I didn't ask enough questions and I didn't ensure that we were aligned on no, I think I'm coming in at this level. No, actually, you're coming in at this other one. I was behind on promotions.
When did you realize that?
Within the first 2 weeks of starting, as I saw my title, like in the system, was not what I thought my title was supposed to be.
Oh, wow. And then did you have a conversation with any of the people you'd interview with or your manager?
Oh, yes.
And what was the response?
You should have asked questions. You should have known.
Yeah.
Why didn't you say something? It was my fault. Which, to be fair, probably was my fault, right? I should have asked the question. It's nobody's responsibility but my own to ensure that the level I think I'm interviewing for, because what do they know? They don't know what level I think in my head.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I should have validated those assumptions, and I didn't, and I paid the price for it.
And because there's something there to, not whose fault it is, but yes, there's ownership on both sides, right? You applied to a specific position, right? There's
Yes.
an ATS record inside of their thing, which ties your application to that level.
Yes.
And nowhere in the chain was there a discussion about your application has actually been decreased to a different level,
Right.
except
Nobody
somebody else made that
notified
decision.
me. Hey,
Nobody,
we
yeah,
think you're interviewing as
no,
SD2. We're going to offer you at SD1 because blah, blah, blah.
yeah. There was never any notice of that. It just was there, and they assumed that you would pick up on it and figure that out. And as interviewing in the beginning, one of your first jobs
Right.
out of college, like you just don't know.
Right. I didn't know that I should ask, and nobody told me that I should ask. My recruiter didn't say anything to me that I should notice, so
Yeah,
I didn't.
right.
But it was a very, very painful but very valuable lesson in validating assumptions. And I'm not always the best at it, but boy, have I been taught.
You've learned some valuable experience. But the best part is there's a dedicated recruiter who was working with you to get you through the process. And they didn't even bring it up because probably they're incentivized not to bring up that kind of stuff.
They just wanted me to sign, right? They're incentivized by me signing the offer.
Yeah. Hey, Melissa, did you know we actually downgraded your role from this to this? Like, they're not going to bring that to the table. And it's just kind of sad, right? And it doesn't make sense.
We just didn't have a conversation about it, right? Was it a mistake, not a mistake? I'll never know because it was on the paper and I signed the paper. And that's as far as they care. That was it.
And then it didn't change, right?
It didn't change. I had to get promoted back through to the levels that I believed, whatever, they may think something else, but that I believed I was already at.
Yep.
And it's promotion velocity, right? You can't get promotions too close together, especially at a big company. You can't do two at once.
That's one of my, it's one of the saddest, but one of my favorite excuses. Oh yeah, no, we don't do this out of cycle. And then inevitably somebody else will go through something out of cycle because they made an exception. And it's like, now you're just making stuff up. But
we all know that the fastest way to get promoted at a big company is to go to another big company.
Yes.
And then come back.
Yep. Absolutely. But what it did was set up that first couple weeks, which, one of your first jobs, highly exciting and invigorating, and you already had a huge misalignment. And
already.
Feeling was frustration. Nothing but frustration in the beginning, which is hard. That's hard to come back from.
A really hard way to start.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so now in the mParticle world,
yes,
you've made it very clear that you want to go down the people management path. And tell us what happened once you got into this. Was this finally the place that those expectations being aligned in the interview process and everything you had learned about speccing it out was above board and nailed it? And then did it actually happen the way you envisioned?
It sure did, actually.
Good.
So we set very clear expectations. Look, I'm 28 weeks pregnant today. By the time I start and get ramped up, I'm going to be like 39 weeks pregnant. Probably don't want me hiring somebody at 39 weeks pregnant. So we just made a plan, right? We're like, look, I'm going to take a maternity leave. Obviously, I'm going to need something because it's coming whether I want it or not at this point.
Yep.
And then, probably in the first 2 or 3 months back from maternity leave, not the best time to be building an org. At least for me, it wasn't.
Yep.
So we made a plan about rough time frame, what I was going to work on, what I was going to lead, and then we started building those pieces in. And then about 9-10 months after my son was born, we reconnected on the plan. We're like, yep, this is still the plan. I was given a head count, and they said, go hire this head count. And I hired that head count. And then I was given 2 more head counts. And they said, okay, go. You filled that one pretty good. Let's do 2 more. And I filled those head counts. And it just kept building over time as I, had, showed that I was capable of hiring, running a program. We were a remote office, so it was just me. I was the senior person in the office. Without, direct oversight. I used to joke, I don't have a boss on this side of the country. We can do whatever we want, which was sort of true. We didn't do anything too bad, AK, I promise, if he's listening. But I was able to iteratively build trust in my ability to actually, I can do this. I can be technical. I actually can be a leader. I can build this team up basically from nothing, from the ground up. Yeah. I built, I hired a lot of people. I hired like 30 something people over the course of the years. Now I have an org. They don't all report to me anymore, but now I have an org with a couple of managers across 3 or 4 teams. But I was able to build it iteratively over the last 5 years, but really the last 4.
Okay.
And as I proved I could do every step, I was given more power to do the next step, and
Yeah.
the next
Yeah.
step, and the next step. And the big difference
Wonderful.
is I stayed aligned with my expectations and my leadership, and they were clear with me on, we will support you.
Hmm. Now, when you stayed aligned, say you stayed aligned with your leadership on the expectations, was this something that you were driving, they were driving, both sides were driving? I mean, you wanted to make sure you were aligned, but like, how did that actually happen? Because a lot of times good intentions can fall by the wayside if not both parties aren't doing it. So how did you actually stay aligned over all this time, and when going out of maternity leave, coming back, all the changes, team building, all that good stuff? How did you stay aligned?
Communication for the most part, and being explicit about expectations. Actually, being remote helped in some cases because we would write it down in Slack to talk to each
Yeah.
other, but then we could go review the conversation we had in Slack. So even if it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't enough that we wanted to go make a doc and do all these things about it, at least I could see. And then
Yeah.
we could augment that with with a Zoom or a, a video communication. But there was always the written record of, here's
Yeah.
what we said. And then it took time to rebuild trust, mostly for me because I'd had some trust issues with staying and being aligned with my manager and being rewarded for the things that I thought were important.
Yeah.
So it took time to rebuild the like open and honest communication that you need for alignment. Right? You cannot be aligned if one of you is lying.
Yeah. 100%. And that's wonderful. So the written piece is interesting, and I think one of the greatest benefits of the world going remote during the pandemic, right,
Hmm.
was the forcing function of, you can't just have a conversation and make decisions anymore because there were too many people involved. They weren't all in the office, and you
Hmm.
had to actually write something down, whether
Exactly.
it was in Slack, whether it was in a doc, whether it was in a spec doc, whatever it was, you had to actually write it down. And that sounds like it was a huge asset for you in ensuring, and being remote helped to support that, was that there was always a record of what the
Exactly.
alignment was.
We were very fortunate that we'd been running as a satellite office for years, right?
Yeah.
For years before we went remote for COVID. So a
Yeah.
lot of the muscle memory wasn't really a change. There were a few of us who were in the office together, but the biggest thing we missed was lunch and hanging out and seeing, the informal level of relationship building.
Yeah.
But work-wise, we barely missed a beat because
That's
we were
awesome.
already on our laptops, already from wherever,
Yeah.
already used to Zooming with half the other engineers in the company.
And already specking things out in documented form so that people in other parts of the country or other parts of the world could actually read and consume it without having to talk to you one on one
Exactly.
necessarily. Right.
Exactly. We're already very painfully aware of the damage that happens when you have a lot of one on one conversations and then nobody brings it all together into a group and a document and writes it down
And
because
that,
we'd already
I
experienced
believe,
that.
that was a core issue that exists in all office environments right up till the shutdown of the pandemic.
Absolutely.
It was easy, right? You
Yeah.
can't blame them. It's like, hey, and a lot of people, when we went remote, were like, it was so great. I just miss being able to have a conversation with somebody, make a decision, and move on. And it was like, yeah, but
Hmm.
nobody else knew that. And in 3 months, when somebody said, what did we decide about that? Nobody could recall what actually
Exactly.
was the context. So
Because you might have written it on a whiteboard, but
yeah,
you wrote it on a whiteboard and nobody took a picture and then nobody posted it somewhere and then you erased the whiteboard and it's gone forever.
yeah. But the two people in that room remember something, and chances are they remember different things about that conversation.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Never mind the
It's
people who weren't even there.
right, right. It's amazing. So that, from a leadership perspective, the pandemic, I think, drove more people towards your style and what you're saying, which is so important, which is focusing on first principles, documenting everything, getting alignment and agreement on something that is actually documented and reviewable and, archivable to the point where you can look at it in the future, just to stay above the board and not have any misaligned expectations.
Right. Exactly. Critical. And I never will say I'm grateful to COVID for anything, but I am grateful that we as an industry have figured out how to communicate remotely effectively.
Agree. And I feel the exact same way. Being able to engage with companies all over the world because I didn't have to physically be in their office was a godsend. It was like, hey, yeah, the world keeps turning. It's okay. And actually, this can make us better and more efficient and have better outcomes as a result of doing these exact same things like you're talking about from a leadership perspective.
Exactly. It seems slower in the moment to moment, but over the long term, over the quarters, it's faster.
Oh, 100%. You got to slow down to go fast.
Got to slow down to go fast.
All right, Melissa. Okay, last question here. Let's say that you could go back in time to that early Microsoft time, perhaps,
Hmm.
and you know everything that you know today of all the experiences that you've had, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything. And you can sit down with your younger self at that early Microsoft point, perhaps before you found out that they pulled the quick switch on your job code and job level. What advice would you share with your younger self?
Don't be afraid to ask questions.
Mm,
Don't assume that everybody, just because you think something, everybody will agree, that everybody has the same understanding. Just because it seems logical and obvious to me doesn't mean it actually is.
yeah,
Been, I don't know, probably the biggest source of issues in my professional life has been making assumptions that we're all aligned when we are not.
yeah.
And then not doing any work to validate the alignment or else fix it.
Love it. Love it. Wonderful advice. Hard earned advice.
Very hard earned.
Cool. Well, Melissa, it's been an absolute blast to spend some time talking with you about your leadership journey. Love hearing about all the incredible things that you and the mParticle team are doing. So can't wait to hear about all of that in the future. So thanks so much for spending time with me. Take care and have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
My pleasure.